Hello, I'm Ben Chewy from TV35. Welcome today to another installment of Cranford Veteran Profiles. And today I'm with a war veteran, Lieutenant Art Snyder. Thank you for meeting with me, sir.
Thank you.
So, I heard you fought hard for your country, and we have much thanks for that. Can you care to tell us your stories of what you did in the military?
Yes. I'm going to take a 66-year trip back in time to start. I was a senior, 1950, at Rutgers. A1 in a draft. We had a draft going on at that time, deferred till I graduated from college. I was about to be drafted as a private. I would rather be an officer. I took May of 50 competitive tests in the Air Force and in Navy. Both of them offered me a direct commission. I accepted the Air Force, second lieutenant, active duty, June 1950. Base salvage officer, Maxwell Air Force Base. Safer job than a housewife. I'm not the smartest person. In July, the Korean War started. I said, I can't be a salvage officer. I have to get in combat. I paid a good price for that mistake. I volunteered, applied for flight training, took the physical, the coordination, the eye tests, passed them all, got accepted in flight training. Off to Waco, Texas to start primary training. First day there, 20 of us lined up. The instructor looked at us, said, look at the person on the right, look at the person on the left. At least one of you will wash out because we have a 40% washout rate. The plane that we were going to fly, T6, excellent plane, fun to fly. You'd love to own one, albeit too difficult to fly, start flying. Just 550 horsepower. They stopped flying it. They found it was too difficult to start with. You couldn't solo before 20 hours in the Air Force. The Navy wouldn't let you solo to 30 hours. Exactly at 20 hours, the instructor hopped out of the plane and said, solo. I don't, no, I'm not ready to solo. You don't know how nervous I was. I took off. Plane was flying terrible. I said, could it make that much difference not having an instructor in the back seat? On a downwind lane, I said, well, maybe if I took up the landing gear, the plane could fly a little better. I landed, not the best landing, but I did. Eventually, I finished primary training at Waco. We then went to Randolph Air Force Base for advanced training. The advanced training was B-25, twin engine. You might remember that's the plane that Jimmy Doolittle flew off the Hornet in 1942 on a raid to Tokyo. You had twin engines and a pilot and a co-pilot. A relatively easy plane to fly. Jimmy had 16 planes take off, bombed Tokyo. They did very little damage, physical damage, but tremendous psychological advantage because Japan was convinced that it couldn't be bombed. And here's a simple plane with no armament, slow moving, had no problem bombing. Psychological effect was terrible. I finished my B-25 training. Incidentally, the B-25 was the noisiest plane I ever flew. The pilot and the co-pilot sitting shoulder to shoulder used the interphone to speak because you couldn't hear each other. I have no hearing in my left ear. I think I left it in a B-25.
Oh my.
9 of us out of the 20 got our wings and off to Langley Air Force Base, Virginia, to start combat crew training in a B-26. B-26, much more difficult plane to fly. And the Air Force, in their wisdom, had 2 pilots in an easy B-25 and 1 pilot in a B-26. It was called a Widowmaker because it killed so many pilots.
Oh my.
It had 14 forward-firing guns. It carried 5,000 pounds of bombs plus rockets. Interesting, it could have been a dangerous story. It turned out pretty funny, actually. We had bombing practice. There was a sunken ship in the Chesapeake. We'd have bombing runs trying to hit the boat. We had a firing range where we'd fire our 14 caliber, 1450 calibers. One mission, I'm not too familiar with the plane. I was descending from 8,000 feet down to 500. I was turning the plane, still uncomfortable flying. The armament switches were overhead behind the pilot's head. I'm reaching back to arm the 50 calibers. Oops, my finger was on the trigger. I fired off a round of 50s through Smithfield, Virginia. Smithfield hams. We got letters that the cows weren't giving milk.
Oh.
The pigs weren't gaining weight.
Uh-oh.
And thank God I really did no damage. If they didn't want to get me back over to Korea, I probably could have gotten in trouble for that. I finished my B-26 training, off to Stead Air Force Base for survival school, Reno, Nevada. We'd have exactly what we'd have if we bailed out of a plane in Korea. A parachute, a 45, some pemmican. Pemmican is some food that we carried in our pockets. And basically that was it. We're on a mountaintop with 3 foot of snow, and we had to try to survive with no food. The only food I got, I killed a porcupine.
Oh. You can eat those?
No, I did eat it, but you can't eat it. It was terrible eating. I found a rusty can, melted snow, cooked the porcupine for 12 hours, and it was still as tough as leather, but I ate it because I was so hungry. Finished survival school, Travis Air Force Base in San Francisco. I'm going to fly a B-26 to Korea, start my combat tour. The first leg is from Travis to Hickam, Hawaii, which is about 2,200 miles. A lot longer distance than a B-26 is designed to fly. So I flew it to make sure that we not have a gas hog, that we had no mechanical problems. We couldn't have a headwind, and we need good visibility. And the bomb bay was filled with extra fuel. Eventually, everything was right. I headed to Hickam. Characteristic of a B-26, we're told, is that you can't ditch it. It's nose heavy, and you try to ditch it, it'll go under and immediately. So if you got fire or mechanical problems, you had to bail out. It was about 12 hours in a seat that I couldn't move. Mm-hmm. Made it to Hickam. Then it was island hopping. The next stop was Johnson Air Force Base, which I didn't know existed. It was a man-made island in the Pacific, I guess made in World War II. The only thing on it was a landing strip. Next up was Guam, Wake, Okinawa, K9, Korea. I became a member of the 17th Air Force 95th Squadron, so-called the Kicking Mule Squadron. We had 8 of us lived, pilot and bombardiers lived in a shack. It had 8 beds and a kerosene stove in the middle. Better than a foxhole, but not much better. My navigator and I got the best 2 beds in this shack, and we couldn't figure out why the other 6 people didn't take one of those beds. About 3 days later, we found out why. The pilot and the navigator that were in those beds were killed. Mm-hmm. And they just didn't feel right moving into their beds. Mm-hmm. We're going to fly. Everything that moved in North Korea moved at night. Mm-hmm. So our missions would be about 5 hours at night. Very simple. Destroy anything that moved.
So I guess you moved at night so you wouldn't get detected?
Well, that's right. They thought there was less chance of being detected if they flew at night. Hmm. So sometimes we took off for 5 hours at 5 o'clock. Sometimes we took off at 10 o'clock at night, and we'd fly. We'd look for trains, convoys, trucks, personal buildup, bridges, tunnels, anything we could destroy in North Korea. We had to fly low, about 500 feet. If we couldn't find targets, we would also throw thousands and thousands of nails on the roads to cause flat tires for their vehicles. When I saw a train, what I would do is come from the back of the train to the front, fly over it, drop a bomb in front of the engine, stop the train, and then come in and try to destroy it. First we would do is blow up the engine, and then we'd start machine gunning and bombing the boxcars. The boxcars frequently had a lot of troops in them, and when we start firing the 50s, they'd get out and try to run for cover. When they did that, we'd drop napalm bombs on them. Napalms, of course, catch on fire when they hit the ground. A napalm bomb will basically cover about the size of a football field. And when it lands on a person, they start burning, and they can't get it off. And we call them fireflies. They look like fireflies. Oh. And we try to estimate how many people were on fire. We also, one of the second train that I was going to destroy, unbeknown to me, the second car was a gun car. They had anti-aircraft guns, machine guns, small arm guns, and they opened up on me. They got my port engine. They got my landing gear. I did not destroy that train. My base was K9 in Busan. I could not make it back there. I crash landed at K8, which is up near Seoul. Wheels up landing. They counted 42 holes in the plane from small arm.
Wow.
Yeah.
You were lucky that you got out.
Yeah. Lucky I survived. If you can believe it, they had that plane back in the air in about a week.
Sounds like it worked overtime repairing it.
Oh, yeah, yeah. A combat tour was 50 missions. I estimate, I had 38 missions. I never got 50. I had 38 missions. My scorecard, and this is an estimate, I think I destroyed 6 engines, maybe 50 boxcars, probably 100 trucks. I got 6 tanks, 2 bridges, and quite a few tunnels. My best friend at K9, Ken, was a World War II retread. He's a pilot in World War II, wow. Called back. Nicest person you ever met. He was a professor in Atlanta, Georgia. In his private life, he had a wife and 2 small daughters. We could never find him in the afternoon. One day I discovered where he was. Each shack had a housemaid to take care of the house. And he had set up a training course in English for all these girls, and he would spend a couple hours afternoon teaching the housemaids about the United States and how to speak English. The first thing you would do in the morning when you get up, instinctively look to see that all the sheets, the beds were slept in, the 8 beds. Wasn't aware of this, but you did it. One morning I got up, Ken's bed and his navigator's was not slept in. This was his 48th mission. I barreled down to the flight line. I knew the answer. His plane did not come back. Yeah. We had a 400 B-26s in Korea. We lost 151. Each plane had 3 crew members, so roughly there were no survivors. We lost about 450 crew members. You can't get shot down at night in North Korea at 500 feet and survive. If I went to Korea in September of '51. In February of '52, I had 38 missions. I was transferred out to Clark Air Force Base in the Philippines. A brand new wing being designed called the 581st Air Resupply and Communication Wing, a misnomer. It was a CIA wing designed for covert missions, psychological warfare missions, in violation of the Geneva Convention. If you flew for the 581st, you were a war criminal. Not a good assignment. We had all different type of planes. I was taught to fly the B-29 went through a training course, learned how to fly the B-29. Our B-29s were different than most. They were painted black, had no guns, and no USAF markings on them. If my plane said USAF, I would not be sitting here. We also could not carry any identification on us, not even dog tags. I sneaked a picture of my mother in my pocketbook for every mission. Right this minute, 66 years later, that same picture is in my wallet while I'm sitting here right now. My good luck charm.
I'm glad the picture held up all those years.
It's in pretty bad shape, no, but I still have it, yes.
Nice.
It's okay. We had all different type of missions. Once I went to Formosa, now called Taiwan, to fly for Chiang Kai-shek in China. He had been forced out of China to Formosa, and they needed bombing missions in China. So some of us went up. I was there for 3 months, flying actually for Chiang Kai-shek's son. Tiger Wang was his name.
Tiger Wang?
Yeah. And I flew B-29s, combat missions in China for 3 months. Chiang Kai-shek treated us very well. Nice accommodations, good food. They did everything they could for us. Actually, after the 3 months and we're leaving, they threw a nice party for us back to Clark Air Force Base. Next, we started bombing missions in Thailand, about 30 miles north of Bangkok. We would fly from Clark Air Force Base, drop the bombs, try to destroy its target, and fly back to Clark. On one mission, I lost an engine, and I could not make it back.
Uh-oh.
So I land in Bangkok while they were going to try to repair, and the mayor of Bangkok treated us very well.
Oh, that's good.
We had good food. He took us on a tour of the city. He took us, one of the worst sights you'll ever see, he took us to opium dens. People dying. All they did was smoke opium until they died. When my plane was in trouble, I landed in Bangkok. The mayor of Bangkok decided to have a flatware set made up as a gift for me. They had 144 pieces made from carving knives to swizzle sticks, case-hardened bronze, bone handles, caribou bone, all made by hand and given to me appreciation of what we were doing for them. To this day, they have never been out of the container, the 144 pieces, except the show. We had a lot of time waiting for the planes to be fixed. One of the things we used to do, 4 of us would rent rickshaws with runners and would have races around town.
Oh, wow, that sounds pretty fun.
We would bet on who had the fastest runner. I ended up in trouble. I got amoebic dysentery there and ended up in a hospital. No air conditioning, of course. It was 100 degrees and under mosquito netting because there's lots of bugs on the outside of the netting, but you had to be careful. So I ended up being in a hospital with amoebic dysentery for 2 weeks before I was well enough to come back. Got back to Clark. It's January the 12th, 1953. 4 B-29 crews are going up to Yokota, Japan to start flying psychological warfare missions in Korea. We're flying up loose formation, the 4 of us, and on the way up, one of the radio operators picked up Korean Katie. Korean Katie was a propaganda like Tokyo Rose, and she knew more about our operation than we knew. When you fly for the CIA, you normally don't know much more than what your mission is for the day. But evidently there was a mole in our organization, and she knew everything about us. And she said, we all listened. She said, Colonel Arnold, the wing commander, is flying up with 4 planes, start psychological warfare missions in Yokota, Japan, in violation of the Geneva Convention. They're war criminals. Colonel Arnold is going to fly the first mission tomorrow night, and we will shoot him down. We got up there January 12th, 53. January 13th, Colonel Arnold with 13 people, most of the top brass, flew the first mission, shot down. We lost our wing commander on the first flight. We claimed it was north of Pyongyang. They said he was north of the Yalu, which you shouldn't cross. I suspect I know where he was. So I flew the first mission the 5th night, and I got to tell you, I was nervous.
What's the difference between psychological campaigns and normal campaigns?
Well, we didn't drop any bombs. Here, I'll tell you, well, we were not allowed to tell what we did for 50 years. We could never discuss it, but the 50 years are up. I'll tell you a mission, psychological warfare. The F-86 and the MiG-15. F-86 was our fighter. MiG-15 was a Russian fighter. They had air battles over Korea. Overall, the 86 was a better plane, but the MiG-15 had certain advantages. One, it was faster. 2, it could turn, make tighter turns, but the big advantage the MiG had, it had a service ceiling that was 3,000 feet higher than an F-86. So in 86, say we could go to 50,000 feet, the MiG-15 could go to 53,000 feet. And the F-86 couldn't get up and attack them. And they could come down and attack when they wanted to. So we wanted to get some MiGs to find out why they had these advantages. You asked about psychological warfare. We had leaflet missions made up in Chinese and Russian. I flew into China air bases, and dropped these leaflets. I flew into Russia and dropped the Russian leaflets. What the leaflets said was that if you will fly a MiG-15 down to South Korea, flap your wings, we'll not shoot you down, we'll give you $100,000 and make you a citizen of the United States. We got 2. Both Chinese. The first Chinese pilot came to the United States, and of course $100,000 back then was a lot of money. He went to the University of Chicago, got his PhD, and became either a physics or a chemistry professor there, and pretty famous. I don't know what happened to the second person, but now, dropping the leaflets in Russia, coming out of Russia, about 3 a.m., I was at 20,000 feet, about 30 miles north of Vladivostok, Russia, heading towards the Sea of Japan. I got jumped by a MiG-15. Lucky for me, Russia and the United States had identical B-29s. So he came up to find out if it was a Russian B-29 or a United States B-29. And as I told you, if my plane said USAF, he would have just shot me down. He tucked in right under my left wing. I looked at him and he looked at me. We could almost identify. Of course, I had no guns. I actually stupidly was thinking about firing my .45 at him. I decided that was not such a good idea. He dropped his landing gear, put his boards out to slow down. When he did that, I put the B-29 into a dive. Why the wings didn't come off, I flew it over 50 miles over the red line. I got into cloud coverage at 14,000 feet before he could get his landing gear up and got away.
That was
I'm 100% post-traumatic stress disorder. The most serious category is unemployable, and I'm classified as unemployable. With my problems, supposedly VA say no one would hire me. Partly because I see his face in my nightmares. I could identify him right this minute. So I had 10 psychological warfare missions similar to what I just described to you. And back to Clark Air Force Base. Oh, one other mission. Coming back from a mission to Yokota, the weather was normally miserable, and we were in a thunderstorm, and supposedly we were over Yokota, Japan, and we could not raise Yokota, Japan. And we thought it was because of the thunderstorm. Lightning, thunder, no visibility. Do you know what St. Elmo's fire is?
Unfortunately, I forgot at the moment.
Well, okay. This is the only time I ever saw it. The plane was so charged, it got hit by lightning so many times, that static electricity.
Oh, wow.
If you touched the plexiglass, it'd shoot a static flame a foot out. Funny sight, you watch the propellers, they had balls of static electricity bigger than a basketball, and they'd be going around about this fast and get real heavy, and the ball would roll off and another ball would form. Static electricity, that's the only time I've ever seen it. Finally, my navigator started screaming, "Climb, climb, climb." He made a navigation error. We were making circles trying to contact Yokota at 8,000 feet with mountain peaks 10,000 in the area.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, very frightening. We came in. When we found out the navigation error, we got there, we had no trouble. He came in and ripped his wings off and said, "I'll never fly again."
Oh.
Yeah, he almost killed us.
It's being struck by lightning in the air does seem pretty traumatic.
No, it doesn't bother you.
Oh, that's good.
No, it doesn't bother. It's just interesting to touch part of the plane and shoot static flame shoot out. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. It's only a second, too.
Oh, okay.
It's not a permanent thing. Back to Clark Air Force Base. The Korean War ended in July of '53. And of course, our 581st had to find someplace to fight. They decided the French wanted help, and they needed in French Indochina. Of course, the French lost every war they ever fought, and they were losing here, and they asked us for help. And 581st decided that they would go up. And what I'm telling you here may not be the truth, because to this day, the United States denies that was 400 of us flying for the French. The French have written a lot about what we did, but the United States says it never happened. We needed more pilots to go up there, and so we CIA started recruiting pilots. One of the pilots was Jimmy McGovern, nicknamed Earthquake Magoo.
Oh my.
Earthquake Magoon, from Elizabeth, New Jersey.
Oh, it's right next to here.
Yeah, a extremely colorful character. In World War II, he was a flying tiger, flying in China. He was an ace. He shot down 9 planes. He was shot down, taken prisoner. And, you know, prisoners are a nuisance because the only thing a prisoner does 24 hours a day is figures out how he can escape. So you have to watch him. And back then, the easiest thing was just to kill the people rather than take care of them. For some reason, they didn't kill Jim, and he got away. He was 260 pounds with a massive appetite. And I'll show you a picture later of him. The joke was that they couldn't afford to feed him. So when World War II ended, most of the flying tigers started flying for an airline called CAT, C-A-T, Civil Air Transport, that flew B-26s, C-46s and C-47s around China. CAT Airlines. I knew a lot of the CAT pilots. From Clark, I would fly to Hong Kong on weekends and meet a lot of the CAT pilots. In every restaurant you went to, knew Jimmy McGovern. He had 4 passions. One was food, one was drinking, one was flying, and one was women, and not in that order.
Oh my.
Yeah. We recruited, well, what I didn't know at the time when I met these CAT pilots, and I'm not sure they knew, it was really not a commercial airline at all. CAT was 100% owned by the CIA. I didn't know that till 15 or 20 years ago, that CAT was, a CIA airline. We recruited Jimmy, among other pilots, came to Clark. They were going to teach him to fly C-119 cargo planes. I could tell you some unbelievable stories about him. I don't think he was there 2 weeks, and he had a beautiful mestizo girlfriend.
Oh my.
Mestizo there was a girl who her mother was Philippine and her father was a white, maybe a sailor or a serviceman. And most of the mestizo girls were extremely attractive women. Anyway, Earthquake in no time had a girlfriend there, and he became a legend in the bars in Tokyo, in Manila. In May of 53, no, November of 53, 400 of us, I think, went to French Indochina. I was stationed at Da Nang. He was stationed at Dien Bien Phu, flying C-119s. I was back to flying B-26s for the French. Flying for the French is not like flying in Korea, because in Korea, if you were going to attack a certain mountain, bomb it, you knew we were going to attack it. When you fly for the French and they're going to attack, they may not show up to attack. You know, they just have a different philosophy about, but anyway, they were collapsing May the 6th, 1954. Jim McGovern was flying a C-119, was supposed to try to drop Gatling guns into the French. They needed guns. His plane got hit. He tried to make it to Laos rather than French Indochina, because if he landed in French Indochina, he would have been taken prisoner. He crashed right at the border of Laos. And something I didn't know about a C-119, you can't crash land a C-119 and survive. They break up.
Oh.
I told you I crash landed a B-26 at K-8 in Korea, and they're back in the air with no problems for me. His C-119 got wrecked and he got killed May the 6th, day before the French collapsed. They surrendered May the 7th. DNA over the years has improved. In about 5 or 6 years ago, they found Jimmy's, they identified his remains. They brought him back. His family had moved from Elizabeth to Basking Ridge. They brought the remains back, and the family feud started on where to bury him. Some of his family wanted him buried next to his brother in Basking Ridge. Other people wanted him buried in Arlington National Cemetery. After a long family feud, they decided he would have a final reunion with his Flying Tiger friends at Arlington. Now, I don't know if you ever saw a funeral. It's really an elegant affair. Jimmy's remains were in a coffin, an American flag over it, drawn by 4 black horses. They probably had 50 soldiers in dress uniforms marching alongside, a trail of cars behind it. They took him to the burial site, played taps, and buried Jim. And when the French collapsed in May the 7th, went back to Clark Air Force Base. There's no more wars, so they disbanded the 581st. This is some of the medals that I have earned. The upper right is the Distinguished Flying Cross, which was the highest medal that I received for saving an F-86 pilot's life. Next to it is an Air Medal. Air medals are given for a certain number of combat missions, and I think I have 4 air medals, and I really don't remember most of the other medals. I came to the United States. I had been overseas 2 years and 11 months, basically in combat most of the time. Back in those days, we didn't have emails, we didn't have telephones, we had no conversations. My parents could have been dead for 3 months, I wouldn't have known it. You know, a letter took 3 months to get there. I came back in August of '54 to the United States, Randolph Air Force Base, B-57 Canberra instructor. Brand new plane in the Air Force. A lot of problems.
Oh.
It's a replacement for the B-26.
It wasn't as good?
What?
The replacement wasn't as good as the one before?
No. No. The B-26, I told you I had 42 holes in it, and it brought me back. A Canberra came down too easy. I mean, it didn't take much to shoot a B. And like all new planes, they had problems with it. I'll tell you 2 problems. One of my friends was flying the B-57, and the fuel was coming out of one wing and not the other wing. So one side of the plane was getting heavier than the other. And instinctively, when a plane is not flying straight, you hit the trim tabs to straighten it up. He hit the trim tabs, there's no more trim tab. With that, the plane rolled over on the heavy side and crashed and killed him. Second story, my roommate and I, my roommate played tournament bridge, and the night he was supposed to fly, he had a tournament. So he asked to switch flights with me. We switched flights. He took mine, I took his. The plane, the B-57 Canberra, had liquid oxygen. It must have got a spark in it, and it exploded, killing him.
Sorry to hear that.
Interesting, we had a lot of F-80s at Randolph, and we could use them for cross-country navigation on weekends. Well, my cross-country navigation went from Randolph in Texas to McGuire in New Jersey.
Oh wow, that's quite a
flight. So I would leave there maybe at noontime on a Friday, fly up to McGuire. My parents would meet me there. I'd spend a weekend at home. Sunday afternoon, they'd drive me back down to McGuire, and I would fly back down to Randolph. I almost became a commuter. One Saturday night, and I don't know the answer to this day. One Saturday night, my mother invited Nancy, my wife, for dinner. I don't know how they knew each other. Economically, they were on very different levels. Nancy was a school teacher in Highland Park, but she invited, I met Nancy, and we started dating. Got to the point when I'd fly up my F-80 for the weekend, she would pick me up, and then she would drive me back down. We eventually got married. We had you might say, an arranged marriage. Good one for 62 years.
Oh, wow, nice.
She died in April.
Sorry.
Yeah. In May of '55, I grounded myself. I refused to fly. I had had too many close calls. I thought maybe I had used up my 9 lives and time to stop flying. So I grounded myself, refused to fly, and got discharged in August of 55. I have 100% for post-traumatic stress disorder. I have 20%. The B-26s in Korea had no heat in them. A typical mission was 20 below zero. We actually had 3 missions that were 30 below zero. Try flying a plane for 5 hours at 20 or 30 below zero.
That sounds pretty dangerous.
Yeah, dangerous, yeah, because you have no feelings in your feet or your hands. But anyway, I ended up with my fingers and my toes all frozen. So I have 20% for that. And I have 20% for no hearing in my left ear. So I'm classified as 140. Of course, for pay purposes, it can't be more than 100%. So, my career.
Thank you for everything you've done for us, Lieutenant Snyder.
Thank you. And I enjoyed it. Thank you.
My pleasure. This is Ben Chewy from TV35. Tune in another time for another installment of Cranford Veteran Profiles. Have a good day.